Hi, Claire. Thank you very much for agreeing to talk to me today. For those who are watching that don't know your story or who you are or what you do you want to give just a little bit of an introduction to those people?
Sure. So hi everyone, I'm Clare Muscutt and I'm founder and director of a small boutique customer experience agency in London called CM Experience.
Fantastic. Thanks, Claire. And looking at obviously I did a little bit of LinkedIn stalking of you prior to this, and we've had a few chats, and I've seen a lot of your content on LinkedIn. People might be interested. You had a really good job in a FTSE 100 company, which you then left to go and do your own thing. Some people would look at that and say that was crazy. What was going through your mind at the time?
I have to kind of go back to the fact that when I was growing up, there was an expectation, I think, that I was conditioned to believe that success looked like a corporate career in a FTSE 100, that you'd meet a man, get married, have babies, and simultaneously have this like corporate career and family. But I was only in my early 20s at the time, so I thought that was, going to be what happened. And for me, I just always focused on the zeros on a paycheck, the number of people working for me, and the glamorousness of a job title as being what success looked like. But whilst I was working towards all of those things, working that hard meant I didn't actually have time to invest in going out and like finding a relationship.
Mm.
So by the time I got to 35 and had all of those things, I sat back and waited for this like moment of rapture to happen, where it was like, yeah, you've ticked that box, you've filled your um, achievement in terms of the job side of things. I didn't feel any of that at all. So what was going on in my life at the time was, having delivered some really impressive work and commercial results in customer experience, people had started to notice me and wanted me to come and talk about it on stage. So when my keynote speaking career began internationally, something else changed as well, which was, having spent all that time with my head down and not traveling the world. I'd gone like nice holidays and stuff. I got the chance to go to Australia and took a few weeks off and did my first ever solo travel adventure.
Yeah.
What I found there was this different person who, because she'd been working so hard, had never had time to shine. And when I made that discovery, something started to, I suppose, open, that I wanted to understand and explore further. So, based on that gig that I did in Sydney, I got asked to come back to New Zealand later that year. So, this is only 2017. And I thought, right, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to take more time off and I'm going to travel. I'm going to go on my own again and go and explore some more of these amazing places that I'd only ever heard about. And I took a couple of months off that time. I went to places like Japan, obviously New Zealand, but Hong Kong, Malaysia, and Indonesia. And it was, again, being on my own, having this adventurous experience where I realized there was more to life, basically, than the things I've been conditioned to think that I should want.
And this
So,
experience, this travel experience, redefined your definition of success.
yeah, I guess you could say that. Well, it was just more. It was more that, like, I'd been so focused on trying to achieve the things that I thought I was supposed to. I hadn't ever had time for my own adventures. And when I started to experience what that actually felt like, it was life changing.
Mm.
So what happened was, kind of coincidentally, Office 365 stopped working on my phone, so I couldn't keep track of what was happening at work. And there was this moment in time where I'd gone to these little islands called the Gili Islands, just off Bali. And there's like no electricity, or it kind of comes on and off, and Wi-Fi doesn't work. My hair was massive and my feet were covered in sand all the time. I'd not worn shoes, no makeup. And I'd realised I'd stopped thinking about Sainsbury's and I'd stopped thinking about work. And it was this moment of clarity that I had never, since I started my corporate career, had that feeling of freedom. So when that kind of crystallized, watching the sun go down, it was like, I can't go back, not only to that job, but also to the life that I'd created, because it just wasn't exciting enough for me anymore. So I pretty much came back and quit my job, and 3 months later, didn't really know what I was going to do with my life, but I knew that I wanted it to be full of travel and adventure. Now, being 35 and making that decision to upend absolutely everything, yeah, to a lot of people seemed like a pretty crazy thing to do. But to me, it was only crazy to the extent that if I carried on living my life by other people's standards and expectations of me, I was going to be perpetually satisfied. Yeah. So basically, it was a time to kind of like throw off all of the expectation that I think kind of you're conditioned by society and the people that you hang around with. Like all my friends were, married and having kids, and I was the only one that wasn't. And I didn't feel good about that. It was time to kind of let go of it and see if I lived my life completely on Claire's terms, what was that going to be like? And it didn't involve the corporate career or the man or the babies. So
let's go back to this idea of expectation then, because it seems to me that women that are successful in the conventional business sense, but that have a family, are also expected to be mum and in as well. But the men who are very, very successful in the corporate sense are kind of given a pass to be, away with work, not spending so much time with the kids. There's almost an expectation that's going to be the case. And we talked about this before, so I know we're not. I'm not putting something out there that hopefully you're uncomfortable with, but I know you haven't had children.
Yeah.
Whether that's a yet or whether that's a never will, obviously up to you and not for me to sort of speculate on. But do you sense that pressure that if you were to start a family, you would feel like you had to tone down the corporate success or make some compromises to balance the two?
Well, I have thought about this a lot recently. And I guess when you have kids, you give up your freedom, right? Because you're no longer the most important priority.
100% accurate. Carry on.
So being single as I am, if I wanted to have kids, would I be able to find another person that I would want to be the father of my children? Given my taste in men, probably not. So the only option for me, if I wanted to do it, before time's up, effectively, I would have to choose to do that on my own. And I've been really inspired recently by meeting some lone parents, so women entrepreneurs in business who are absolutely smashing it and can have both. So I don't know whether I've assumed that it would be one or the other, but perhaps that's just as a lack of role models showing you can do both. Be an independent woman who still travels the world with her kid, rather than it having to be a choice of one or the other. So I guess where I've landed at the moment is I don't feel like a massive desire to have a child right now, and definitely I'm not saying not ever, because I think maybe I want a family in the future, whether or not that happens by my own I can't think what the right word is, my own fertile capability or not, who knows. But I think what I landed on was I've actually just got more of a fear of missing out. And again, I don't know whether that's just because I'm so conditioned to think that's what I'm supposed to do, or that if I don't use my fertility and reproductive powers, somehow as a woman I've not done my job again.
And that's a really important point. If you is building that sort of latent pressure, and I don't wish to offend you in any capacity here, but the medical term for a woman, I think over 35.
Geriatric.
There you go, geriatric mum, lovely. So medical professionals basically saying boom, if you haven't had a kid by 35, you're somehow irresponsible or whatever it might be, wasting your best reproductive years and daring to be a geriatric mum. And I know people will just say, well, it's just a medical term, don't get so hung up about it, but it's so loaded with judgment and negative connotations. It amazes me that it hasn't been updated into the 21st century. And, you know, whatever you decide to do, I wish you well with it, but it just seems so bizarre that there's this pressure on women, because no one's putting pressure on men, single men at 36 or 7 to have kids. But if you're a woman in your late 30s, you haven't had kids, people are going, what's wrong with you? Why haven't you done it? And you've had some experiences with this internationally as well, haven't you?
Yeah, I do. And I'll tell you some of my stories in a second, but you just reminded me of a conversation I had with my guy mates a week ago. We had a social distance meetup when we were allowed for the first time. And yeah, so I'm the only single 38-year-old woman in our group, but a lot of the boys are the same age and still single.
Yeah.
And we had that conversation around, you know, why it's so unfair that I would have to, you know, have this pressure on myself because my body's capability to have children doesn't have an infinite period. Whereas they're like, yeah, so I'm swiping on like 24-year-old women, so I can have another 10 years of freedom before they want kids.
Yeah. You know, I please, for the love of God, record them saying that, so that when they're 48 and they have a 3-month-old getting them up in the middle of the night, I can say, you were a dickhead to say that.
Yeah, maybe they're just the unenlightened ones.
Because it's like notwithstanding the fact that men, without getting too anatomical, our ability to reproduce doesn't wane with age in the same way that women's does. Our ability to parent, like my energy levels are pretty good for a 36-year-old, but they're definitely not what they were when they were 26, and they sure as hell won't be better in 10 years' time than they are now. To dudes who are leaving it later and later, you know, they're stacking up some serious shit for themselves when they've got tiny kids running about the place and they're 50. Like, I wouldn't want that. That's not a gig you want to be taking.
Yeah, it just really made me laugh, because that kind of proves the point, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That gender can hold you back in a number of ways, and one of them is having to make decisions at timely periods when you might not really want to.
I know.
Yeah. So this international stuff. So I'd always been kind of like aware of the fact that other women would feel a bit sorry for me, that I didn't have a man in my life and I didn't have children, and I wasn't pissed off by that. I kind of felt like a bit bad for myself in, you know, that kind of time around 35, feeling like, oh yeah, I haven't succeeded in a way that it really came home when, having set up this awesome business where I got to travel the world and spend my life as a digital nomad. I did this backpacking trip with my laptop around Southeast Asia, and being in Vietnam, in Sapa, this place where there's like the beautiful rice terraces, you know, and was watching might have seen or heard of it. But I went and hung out with a lady from the Black Hmong tribe, and she was like my tour guide through the rice terraces, and she just couldn't get her head around the fact that I must have been 36 at the time. And she was like, so where's your husband? And I was like, I don't have one. And she was like, why? What's wrong with you? like, like there must be something that a man didn't want me, rather than me not wanting to have this kind of life.
Yeah.
And culturally, I guess, you know, there's less of an expectation here than there is in some other countries. But yeah, like it just really kind of brought it home to me that, in a way, how lucky I am to have been born, you know, with this kind of privilege in a Western world where I don't have to conform the way so many women do. You know, like women in Africa having to get married at like 12 years old in some countries, because their sole purpose is to be wives and mothers to children. So yeah, in a way, like, it didn't make me feel worse. In fact, it made me feel better that, you know, I'm also not better, feel like realization of how lucky I am to be able to make that choice full stop for myself.
And that's a sort of natural segue into feminism, which has been a common theme in every conversation that I've had, and that's been by design. I think I started the series off because I sort of wanted to be a feminist. I consider myself a sort of feminist in training, if you like, and I've learned a huge amount along the way from everyone that I've spoken to.
And I
And
love this about you, by the way. I just have to say, I absolutely love it.
thank you. I try not to wear it as a sort of badge of honor or anything that I expect or request commendation for. I just kind of want to do it and be it.
Yeah.
I know I make a shitload of mistakes still. I have my own biases to overcome, and I try and often fail to be aware of them. But you and I talked a little bit about feminism, in particular your feminism. And I think everyone that I speak to has got a different, it means something different to all of these women that I've spoken to. So I'd be really interested to kind of hear your view on it. What does it mean to you?
Yeah, I guess it was all kind of timed with this like transition in my life of making these decisions for myself and feeling empowered by them. I think I only really discovered my own feminism at around 35. I think perhaps previously I wasn't a particularly good feminist myself.
What is a
And
good feminist? What sorry, I'm gonna come back to that. What is a good feminist?
well, so. I know I've told you about this before, but what really helped me was discovering Deborah Francis White and the Guilty Feminist podcast,
Yeah.
which is a an incredible book and podcast series that helps women to have the conversation of I'm a feminist, but dot 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 dot. So, for example, one of her like most famous ones is, I'm a feminist, but once I was on a women's rights protest march, had to pop into the loo, and ended up getting so distracted by the makeup counter on the way back, the march had actually moved on. So I think feminism, there needs to be enough room for you to be able to have those contradictions. So, for example, mine would be I'm a feminist, but I quite often think more about what I'm going to wear to do a keynote speech and how I'm going to do my hair than I do about what I'm going to say. So a feminist, I suppose, like an extreme feminist would say, you're doing yourself a disservice by, having, using your body and decorating it to be something rather than using your mind and what you're going to say. Now I think you can have both.
Yeah.
And I'm not choosing to look nice for men. I do it because I feel nice when I've got my makeup on and my hair done. I've also feel good nowadays without it too, but it's not something that should be judged by other people, or I shouldn't feel like I'm not, again, doing a good job as a feminist, as a woman.
I find it's absolutely fascinating. And I'm sure there are countless dissertations written by people infinitely more intelligent and more qualified than me. It's kind of like, where do you stop trying to unpick why people do things? So your point there, we've talked about this before. You like to be glamorous. You like to glam up, and clearly I wouldn't judge you for that. Some of the more sort of extreme feminists you've encountered maybe say you have done. Are they, it's like the sexualization of little girls. If you look at the sort of role models for little girls, they tend to be kind of hyper-sexualized singers and performers. It's super sexualized from a very young age. Girls' clothes are fitted from like 6 onwards, and boys aren't. And their bodies at that, turn them sideways, they look exactly the same at that age is ridiculous. So, I guess playing devil's advocate, someone might say, but do you think you want to dress up for you, but actually you're doing it because it makes you feel better because men like it? But I'm not saying that, by the way. I'm just saying there's a whole male of shit to unpick, isn't there?
Yeah, and like there's a whole debate around like wearing high heels and them being an instrument of the patriarchy. Yeah, like and if you choose to wear high heels, from my perspective, like if you feel good in them, then that's your choice. But some feminists would say that's letting the sisterhood down somewhere. I don't prescribe to that.
Yeah.
I guess for me, feminism is really about being empowered to make the decisions about your own body that aren't forced upon you by the patriarchy.
Yeah.
And for me, feminism is about the, kind of rising against the patriarchy full stop. And you and I have had conversations previously about the fact that if you look at a lot of the problems in the world, where do they stem from? And it is rich white men. So, thinking about, I don't know, lots of the things that you might even look at Netflix today. You've got Harvey Epstein, Weinstein, the whole Black Lives Matter documentaries, and it all comes back to this systemic problem that is propagated by the power sitting with rich white men. So for me, with my own feminism, I'm really finding the nuances in those intersections now. So, as a white, not rich, but not poor woman, I'm in this huge position of privilege to not come into contact with so many of the issues that affect other women that are further away from that white male rich. I probably should add some other things in, cisgendered straight mold that the whole world is set up to serve best and first. So how can I use my privilege, my voice, to help to support the people that need help and to be heard better and more? And I think there's nothing more pertinent than what we're seeing right now with the Black Lives Matter movement. And I see that as an intersection with my feminism. So, how can we work together to stand against something that doesn't affect us directly? So, like for you, what you're doing with your own feminism, you don't experience bias because of your gender, because you're not a woman, but you stand against the problems that women face and want to do something about it. So I guess for me, my extension is, how I can help and support and to raise other people up, other women up full stop. But if you're from a socio-economic background that is poor, your chances in life compared to everybody else automatically are lowered. And again, if you're not white, not straight, not cisgendered, difficulties are basically going to have a compounding effect. So so I think that allyship is so important.
The whole debate seems to descend into toxicity so quickly. I think I saw a woman posted on LinkedIn something the other day where she felt one of their clients was discriminatory towards her and her team because they were all women, and then when they brought in a male member of staff, his attitude completely changed. And she talked around the fact that she obviously wanted that to stop, and she wanted men and women to be given equal opportunities and equal rights, but then caveated it by saying, before anyone starts, I'm not a feminist. And I thought, I couldn't help myself. I said, well, sorry to hear you've experienced this. I mansplained feminism to her, so but I said, look, I'm really sorry to hear you've had that experience. I'm sure you're not alone. It just interests me that you would not consider yourself a feminist when what you want is equal rights and opportunities for women. And I'm sure there are loads of different subshoots of definitions to it, but that at its core is kind of what it's about, isn't it?
Well, I guess what I'm sensing is, like, in this period of coronavirus and everything being kind of burnt down, literally and figuratively, what we're starting to see is the chance for these issues to be explored that we might have possibly ignored. So maybe, like, understanding your own racism, for example, people that kept putting like hashtag white lives matter, all lives matter, sorry. Either were completely actually racist or just were misinformed and ignorant and didn't understand what that meant in comparison to the Black Lives Matter movement. And I think the same is kind of true of feminism. Until you actually kind of confront your own introspective view, you don't really know what you feel. So that woman saying I'm not a feminist is probably because she doesn't understand feminism, and feminism, or the word feminist, has a negative connotation to her because of how it's perceived by other people to be a dirty word. Like, for me, it's just activism, right, on any level. So anti-racist, feminist, there's supporters of causes that are vocal about it and feel okay to say that. Now, I guess, why are people scared of their own feminism? And it can only be because they're scared of how they'll be judged for it, and therefore, don't speak up and don't say anything and stay silent like so many of the people have around, these racism issues or politics. But that silence, or kind of, not wanting to affiliate with a cause, I think is just as dangerous and just as bad, because it doesn't help anyone to stay silent.
I completely agree with you, and I think if there's one thing that I'm deeply flawed in many ways, and
We
nobody's
all are.
perfect.
We all
One thing that I can do, and I'm happy that I can do, is change my mind.
are.
Um, is look at what's been presented to me, and then it's not always overnight, but over time I can assess my own viewpoint, why I have it, and hopefully modify it. Because I think Black Lives Matter was first a movement, probably in this country. I was sort of aware of it maybe 10 years ago. Does that feel about right? I don't know. And at the time, I sort of thought, well, oh well, I'm a white bloke. What's all this about Black Lives Matter? It's taken me a
Oh, yeah.
journey to kind of get, oh shit, I understand why they need it now. I understand why this is so important. It didn't, so I don't judge everyone who's coming out and saying all lives matter as a racist. Some of them are, obviously.
Some are just ignorant, don't understand.
The vast majority are, like I was, just a bit misinformed, a bit misguided. It's clearly obvious that white lives matter because we kind of hold most of the power and the privilege in the
They
world.
always have, right? So it's
That's
not.
right.
That's that intersection again. Sorry.
No, go on, please go.
It's that intersection again. So I said about my own feminism. There's an intersection with women of colour that I recognise my privilege means they have more challenges than I do. So how do I use this intersection with my own feminism to support and amplify the voices of women of colour?
Yeah.
I think, to your point though, what's been so interesting about social media and Black Lives Matter is this absolute clarity of people showing up and showing their true feelings ultimately. Because what we've seen, and we've been involved in a few conversations on LinkedIn where this has been going on, is these three very clear camps of clearly racist people arguing the toss and effectively protesting all lives matter, and they do, and despite any education, that's their real true feeling about the situation. On the other hand, anti-racist people who are actively campaigning for this to be different and to change, and the people in the middle, which I think I would have said I thought I was anti-racist, but what I've learned from this is I had more to do. I still have more to do, I always will. Is like the people on the fence who are misinformed or uneducated. Now what I've seen is a load of people who have gone and educated themselves and have moved into the camp of anti-racist, which is awesome, because you're never going to change the people who are racist or sexist or bigoted in any way. They're the enemy in my book. We can't change them, but what we can do is really help to meet all the people in the middle and help them through education, role modeling, sharing the right messages, amplifying the right voices to help move them into the right camp. Or it wouldn't be the right camp; it would be the left camp. But but that's a choice. I guess the only thing I find inexcusable is not trying to learn and not trying to educate, and especially when it's something that's not affecting you directly. We all carry on with that selfish view of I'm only going to do things and talk about things that matter to me. Like, how are we ever going to make change happen? And now, during this time, I'd love to think it's the time where it's so destructive and there's so much being destroyed, like literally in businesses, organizations. We're going through something that will continue to get worse for a while. That act itself means we can rebuild better.
It's so desperately needed because
businesses, cultures within our organizations, communities, it's every level. There's a chance for systemic change. Without, kind of educating ourselves as to why it's important and what needs to be different, it's not going to happen. So I guess.
Well, I think there are two. There's so much. It is such an interesting and shocking and hopeful topic. There's so much going on with it, emotional and factual, and it's a bit overwhelming at times. But I think one of the things I really struggle with is when people can have different opinions. Fine. When people refuse to acknowledge logic, if there's a logical argument, and people will not acknowledge the logic, because some things are just logically true, right? You can't argue with accurate logic. And one of the things I've seen that's been bandied around a lot is, as a counterpoint to the Black Lives Matter argument, is, oh, well, George Floyd wasn't a very nice man. He was a criminal. He was high on meth at the time he was killed, whatever. All those things might be true. I don't know. I've not looked at the guy's rap sheet. But let's say he was a criminal. Let's say he was in the middle of committing a criminal offence when this happened. I don't know if he was. It's completely irrelevant, because what needs to be addressed is the fact that a white policeman felt empowered to execute. Let's say he was a criminal, but even if he wasn't, but let's say he felt empowered to execute a suspected criminal because he was black, in full view, in the public. And that's what people that are coming in and saying, well, the Black Lives Movement's null and void because it's been triggered by a guy who wasn't very nice. It's so fucking short-sighted, and it makes me so angry.
Yeah, and I think you need to counter that kind of point of view with, well, if you look in comparison to that guy who raped a woman behind a dumpster at a university, who got a 6-month sentence and only served 3 of it for good behaviour, if that guy was high on meth and had a fake $20 bill, so fucking what? Yeah. Look at the injustice between how the white guy who did something far worse and wasn't criminalised for it, really, in comparison to George Floyd. Like, yeah, I think it has to just keep coming back to the evidence, right? You can't deny these facts, that when you look at the numbers of black people in prison, or the assaults by police officers that have resulted in death and injury of black people compared to white people, you can't argue with that. And ignoring it or pretending it's not true, like that for me must be down to racism.
Yeah, and this is where learning is so important, because when I was a younger man, I would look at the statistics of black incarceration rates both in the UK and the US and say, oh, well, even taking into account institutionalized racism, there must be an element of black people are committing more crimes which are likely to see them incarcerated. Now, I don't know whether that's true or not. If it is true, my view to it now is, yeah, but is that because systemic racism puts them into a situation where they have no choice? Like they're impoverished. They're not getting the same opportunities their white peers are. So one thing that I've seen that's been really interesting has been the sort of backlash from the institution to what is a sort of popular movement, if you like. Whether you agree with the means of their disposal, some landmarks commemorating some pretty shitty people have been torn down. So there was Coulson in Bristol. The guy was a slaver. There's no beautifying that. He just was, and his statue should not have been up for as long as it was. Whether you consider it a crime that it was torn down in that fashion is up for you to decide. But then you get the Prime Minister coming out and saying tearing these landmarks down is to I can't remember his exact words, but basically implying that it stopped us from learning from our past, and it was sort of whitewashing our history. And I was, you don't need
whitewashing.
You don't need to commemorate a racist to teach kids in school that racism is bad. And there's clearly a struggle where the status quo and those who want it is fighting desperately to survive at the moment. And I hope that the disruption caused by this pandemic and then the groundswell of momentum with Black Lives Matter is enough to start to knock it off its pedestal.
Yeah, and I guess we're seeing social proof that that's true, right? Because people are protesting, people are coming together, they are like supporting and defending each other. The statues are being torn down, so it's showing that it's changing society. It's just whether or not the system that drives society is going to be different. But I suppose if you look at businesses, there's a very clear standing up for Black Lives Matter from some organisations that they're doing very publicly. Whether or not that's just a PR move will be yet to be seen, but I think it's that introspection now that's most important for individuals, businesses, organisations, systems to go, actually, what can we do differently and better if we really believe, but we need to examine where we're not doing things right as a starting point. And I think that's the first barrier and the first hurdle to get over is going, acknowledging, actually, I might not be perfect. I might not be, aware of my own actions even, because it doesn't affect me. How can you make that starting point of looking within and, having diversity and inclusion boards? I think I've seen a lot of businesses get great success there, but it's what's the intention behind that? Is it to show you've got a diversity and inclusion agenda, but you don't actually increase the number of BAME people in the leadership level? Same with women, and gender equality. There's the acknowledgement, and then there's the action and doing something about it. And until we've got true diversity and inclusion at a leadership level, I don't know how organisations can truly change. But what I always remember is thinking, from a customer experience perspective, even if the people that are leading your business aren't representative of the customer base that you serve, what kind of, opportunity is there to change that and to make that different, or in fact just at least representative of your own customer base? But what we end up with is, again, lots of white middle-aged rich men sitting on those boards as well. No offense to white middle-aged rich men, by the way. It's just
they're too busy being rich to worry about what you think. They don't care, do they?
Yeah, and I'm not I'm not trying to bash the individuals, but again, it's just the patriarchy. But it's the same reason. Inequality for you can't say it's as good or as bad, or it's different, but gender, race, sexuality, it's age, even disability, all of those diversity and inclusion issues are what we need to challenge in a postmodern society where we put people at the heart of everything. And again, I've been talking about on social media, but it's how can we find our humanity now, right? Our humanity as individuals, with our communities. We've got this, it feels like this energy that's like bubbling away, and it's got the potential to do something incredible. But
I just really hope that energy doesn't get bought off too cheaply, if you know what I mean, because I can sense some political gesture coming to say, look what we've done to show how brilliantly anti-racism we are. And it will be low-hanging fruit, and I just hope that the anger and the energy goes, no, bollocks, we're not having that, we want more.
But even like kind of just beyond like the issues is just about humanity, right? It's about people. It's about caring about other people. It's about wanting to elevate people who've had less privilege to be successful. It's about stamping out the root causes of issues that we experience in society. But it starts with caring, right? And it starts by being less selfish, and it starts by putting other people first and really listening and understanding what it is that that those individuals or people full stop need, and then being able to respond and react to that. It's the foundation of what we do in customer experience. How do we think about people experience?
I'm going to credit you with the phrase Corona Coaster, because I've not seen anybody else use it, and I've seen you use it a few times. What does that come from? That's your way of describing how your emotions kind of ebb and flow with the current situation, or what is that? Talk to us about that.
Well, yeah, I guess when lockdown hit first, I was living by myself, so master of my own business, living in an area that I didn't really know anybody, and my whole world fell apart temporarily. Because I was absolutely petrified about what it meant, not only for like myself and my business and stuff, but also like my family, and there was just no kind of clarity around what was going to happen. And as the days progressed and this death rate started shooting up, and every day seeing the news of like all these thousands of lives being lost, like it just rocked me to my core. But then that would be punctuated by these absolute moments of joy in the community, helping each other, or the clap for carers at Thursday at 5 p.m, having just listened to how many people had died. So what it felt like was these loops of continuous like sadness or loss or desolation, punctuated by these like loops up to these joyful moments of seeing as we were talking about, these moments of like brilliance and humanity that you just immediately come back down from. So when I saw this graphic, it was actually called a COVID coaster. I was like, shit, yes, this is exactly how it feels. These just continuous loops of feeling overwhelmed, feeling sad, and I guess, as someone who thought of themselves as like really resilient, to have experienced the emotional roller coaster that I did, it was a massive shock and had me pretty worried for my own mental health for a while.
Yeah.
But seeing that kind of like depicted as a graphic of as a roller coaster made me feel a bit better, and I wanted to share that picture with the world that it isn't this is normal. What you're feeling and experiencing in response to a pandemic is what everybody's feeling. It's just some of them are probably not talking about it as much as others. And I thought it was just so important speaking regularly, openly about my thoughts, feelings, and emotions. I'd only ever really kept that on Instagram because it felt like a really safe place to express myself. But what I've started to do more recently is now start to be myself on other social media platforms where I thought I couldn't, like LinkedIn. And I know like sharing my own kind of vulnerability is helping other people to feel theirs. And, a recurrent theme of life really is about what we see in social media, right? In this conversation, we talked a lot about social media. As long as we're seeing like people pretending to be something they're not, or agreeing with something they don't, or not really showing their real selves and how they feel, how is that ever going to provide the kinds of role models we need, like yourself with your feminism, me with I suppose what people are saying to me is authenticity and vulnerability. That's the kind of change we can help by just being ourselves. And I'm just really, really glad that this time is a time for growth. And for me personally, I'm trying to make the most out of it, grow, learn, share, and help other people as much as I can.
Yeah, I love it. I think I've only known you, via LinkedIn for 2 months, not a hugely long time at all. But I've kind of enjoyed seeing that, even in that short period of time, that more personal, vulnerable kind of approach to your posts. Because on LinkedIn, like you said at the start, it was very business focused, CX focused, which is great. That's the whole point of the platform. But it's been really interesting for me, and I'm sure everyone else, kind of seeing that thread of your personality coming through a lot more.
You do both, right? You can be more than just one dimensional. You can be a woman. I can be a woman who has an adventurous life and a great business and loves customer experience and cares about things.
And wants to get her hair done. It's all fine. It's all fine.
Oh.
That's brilliant. And look, Clare, I really, really appreciate you talking to me. I've really enjoyed it. I love what you're doing in general on on the idea of CX and the idea of women in business. I like the fact that you're vocal about stuff that you care about, and I think it's, like you said, it's really important to be that at the moment and forever from now on. I think too many good people have been too silent for too long. So
let's be proudly ourselves and talk openly, be authentic, and let's see if we can make this crazy world a better place.
Brilliant. And thanks ever so much. Have a lovely weekend, and I'll speak to you really soon.
I really enjoyed it too. Thanks ever so much, Dan. Take care now. Bye.